My dad can fix that, the human girl said, looking at the alien woman's damaged artificial leg. Evening crowds moved like a steady river across the mid-level walkway of Orlon Spire. Lights from the rails above flickered over polished stone. A warm, mechanical hum filled the air every time a train rushed past the viewing windows. Shift change was ending. Workers walked home, officers checked schedules, machines followed their set paths. Kalia pushed through the crowd with a crate held tight against her ribs. The weight pulled her forward, but she kept her elbows locked so it would not slip. She had been doing scrap hauling for almost a year. It was low-status work, paid in ration tokens and full of long hours lifting. Her company never replaced anything unless it stopped working completely. So her artificial leg had been pushed beyond its design for months. The metal frame showed wear. The knee joint clicked out of rhythm whenever she moved too fast. She kept her pace even. She just wanted to reach the collection point on the far landing. After that, she could go back to her small housing room, eat whatever thin soup the company gave out that day, and sleep until the next shift began. Nothing more. She did not expect kindness from the city. Orlon Spire had taught her long ago that alien workers were here to fill quotas, not to be treated as part of the community. The leg gave a soft warning, a quiet grinding near the joint. Her breath caught. The limb had been loose all week. She had tightened the straps, adjusted the clamps, even used a spare strip of cloth to support the socket. Nothing helped the pressure that grew with every step. She shifted the crate again. Her fingers shook from tiredness. The break happened in one sharp moment. A metallic crack shot up her thigh. The knee bent sideways, the prosthetic twisted and folded under her, completely out of place. Her body hit the stone hard. The crate burst open, scattering pieces of metal across the walkway. Pain flashed through her hip, ribs, and palms. She stayed on her hands and knees for 2 breaths before trying to push herself up. People slowed, but no one reached for her. Several commuters stepped around the fallen pieces. A few mumbled about unsafe gear. A man in a company vest stepped wide around her as if avoiding a spill. Someone laughed softly, the kind of laugh people make when someone else is uncomfortable. Kalia swallowed the sting in her throat. She reached for the prosthetic with stiff fingers. The knee ring had split along one edge. Cables hung loose. The joint wobbled wildly when she tried to move it. She felt exposed. Her skirt had ridden up her thigh, and the broken limb drew stares she did not want. She pulled a scattered connector closer. She did not know why she bothered. She could not fix the leg here, but she felt the need to gather her things, to make the mess smaller so people would stop looking. To her right, a girl stopped swinging her legs on the low rail. Lina had been waiting for her father to finish his shift inside the municipal neuroprosthetics bay. She often sat on that rail, passing time by watching the trains rush past. The girl was used to the noise of the station, the distance of the crowds, and the routine of her father's long hours. She understood more than most children. People did not always stop for someone in trouble. But when she saw Kalia fall, something tightened in her chest. She slid off the rail and ran through the traffic with quick, light steps. Her oversized transit jacket bounced at her sides. Few adults grumbled when she cut in front of them, but she did not slow down. Lina knelt beside Kalia. The stone felt cold through her shorts. Up close, she saw every detail, the torn skin on Kalia's palms, the crooked alignment of the prosthetic, the way the limb shook when weight came near it. "You're hurt," Lina said, her voice steady even though her eyes showed worry. Kalia did not answer at first. She was trying to control her breathing. She lifted her head slowly, seeing a child where she expected an officer or a supervisor. "I'm fine," she murmured, though her legs said otherwise. "Please go, people are waiting." Lina shook her head. "My dad can fix your leg, he works right there." She pointed to the glass door of the alignment bay a short way off. Through the window, Ben moved between diagnostic tables, shutting down his tools for the evening. Ben had served 8 years as a frontline medic in an off-world conflict before taking a city job in Orlon Spire. The work was steady, quieter, and let him raise Lina on his own after her mother's passing. His main task at the clinic was simple: recalibrate damaged or misaligned prosthetics brought in by scheduled clients. He handled everything from civilian limbs to special implants, always with calm precision. Tonight, he had planned to finish his logs early and take Lina home for dinner, pan-fried grain slices with smoked meat and vegetables he'd bought from a lower market stall. He was not expecting an incident on his doorstep. Kalia tried to move away from Lina. The attempt made her leg give way again. Pain broke through her forced calm. "I don't have an appointment," she said. "They won't let me inside." "They will," Lina insisted. "My dad helps people who need it." Before Kalia could answer, the ramp supervisor approached. His striped vest reflected the overhead lights, and his steps carried the authority of someone who did not like disruptions. "You can't stay here," he said sharply. "Clear the walkway. If your equipment failed, file a company report." Kalia bowed her head slightly. "I'm trying to stand." The supervisor reached for her arm to pull her up, but Lina stepped between them. "She needs help," Lina said. "Don't touch her like that." The man barely glanced at her. "Children shouldn't interfere with safety rules." Lina pressed closer to Kalia, her small hand wrapped around Kalia's wrist, steadying her. Kalia felt the touch like a shock, someone touching her without impatience or judgment. She wasn't used to it. The contact stirred a nervous heat in her chest, but also a quiet relief she did not want to admit. The supervisor opened his mouth to insist again. He never finished. The clinic door slid open. Ben stepped out. His work shirt hung loosely over his broad frame. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms. Grease from an earlier repair still marked his thumb. He took in the scene in one look, the broken limb, the spilled scrap, his daughter's protective stance, the supervisor standing too close. Ben, the supervisor said with forced calm. This worker is blocking the ramp, handle it. Ben did not address him. He crouched beside Kalia, eyes scanning the prosthetic with practiced focus. Can you feel your residual limb? He asked. Yes, she whispered. But the joint is not holding. It's cracked, he said. You won't make it far like this. She lowered her gaze. I don't have clearance for treatment here. You do now, he said. The supervisor stepped forward. She isn't scheduled. You can't take walk-ins. We're not authorized for unsanctioned alien maintenance. Ben straightened. His expression stayed calm, but his posture changed, a quiet firmness from his years in the field. She fell on city stone, he said. That makes it a public safety case. I'll log it as such. Administration won't approve. Then they can speak to me directly. Something in Ben's voice made the supervisor step back. There was no threat in it, no raised tone, just certainty, the kind that did not bend. Kalia watched them, her pulse unsteady. She wasn't used to anyone arguing for her. She felt an urge to stand on her own just to avoid trouble, but the prosthetic trembled at the thought. Ben turned back to her. I'm going to lift you, he said. Tell me if anything hurts more than it should. She nodded once. He slid an arm behind her back and another under her knees, lifting her in one smooth motion. Her fingers tightened on his shoulder from instinct. His shirt felt warm from the clinic lights. Her thoughts spun briefly, fear of being a burden, shame at being carried, and something else she couldn't name, something steadier. Lina kept her hand on Kalia's arm as they moved through the doorway. Inside, the clinic lights were softer. The diagnostic tables hummed quietly. The smell of metal polish mixed with sterilized air. It felt sheltered, far from the cold stone of the ramp. Ben lowered her gently onto the nearest table. Lina stood beside her, still watching her face, still holding her wrist. For the first time since the fall, Kalia let out a shaky breath. She wasn't safe, not yet. Her job, her housing, her company supervisors, all would react badly if they learned she had got unofficial repairs. But in this room, with these two people standing close, the fear eased enough for her to speak quietly. Thank you, she said. Ben nodded once. Let's see what we can do. The clinic door shut behind them, closing out the indifferent rhythm of Orlon Spire. Ben powered up the diagnostic console. Soft white light spread across the table, outlining every break in Kalia's prosthetic. Lina stood near the footrest, watching each move as if memorizing it. Kalia sat upright, back straight, despite the pain creeping up her thigh. The clinic air felt warmer than the ramp outside, carrying the faint scent of metal polish and cleaner. Her fingers gripped the edges of the table. She wanted to seem steady even though her body shook from the impact. Ben adjusted the light above her knee. Tell me if anything feels sharp, he said. She nodded. It was the first time in a long while someone asked about her comfort as if it mattered. He pressed gently around the socket. She inhaled sharply when he reached a spot where the metal had rubbed the skin raw. He paused, his hand not moving away, just waiting. It's been misaligned for months, she said quietly. The company technician told me it was normal for our model. Lina frowned. He lied, she muttered. Ben didn't correct her. He kept examining the joint with slow, careful motions. This isn't normal wear, he said. The socket was never shaped for your thigh. You've been carrying weight in the wrong place. Kalia lowered her gaze. It came from a recycle bin. My company gives used parts. We sign a release saying damage is our responsibility. Lina's hands curled into fists. That's not fair. Kalia offered a tired smile. Fair isn't something we get much of. Ben looked up at her. You're here now. Let's focus on fixing this. The calm certainty in his voice steadied her. She slowly relaxed her shoulders. He turned to the console. A holographic outline of the joint appeared, flashing red along the broken ring. This section needs reinforcement. The servo housing may be salvageable. He didn't mention the work involved or the time it would cost him after a full shift. He simply pulled a small organizer from the shelf, rows of carefully labeled parts he kept for difficult cases. Lina recognized it right away. Those are your backup pieces, she said. Are you sure? Ben gave her a brief nod. They'll match her system better than anything on the grid. Kalia watched the exchange, unsure why he'd use parts that weren't easy to get. You don't have to use your own supplies, she said. I don't have credits to pay you back. I didn't ask for payment, Ben answered. He adjusted the lamp arm, bringing the light closer to the broken ring. Hold still, she swallowed. Why are you helping me? The question wasn't ungrateful. It held real confusion. People rarely stepped in for her. People passed her every day seeing only a worker uniform and a registration code. Ben's answer was simple. Because you fell and I can repair what broke. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Lina moved closer and picked up a stray metal fragment from Kalia's skirt. Dad always helps people with broken legs. She said it's his job. Kalia looked at Lina, then at Ben, her eyes softening as she put together small details. His steady hands, the girl's certainty, the neat clinic despite long hours. This was their world. Quiet service, not big gestures. Ben opened a drawer and took out a thin gel packet. This will cool the skin, he said. She hesitated, then let him lift the hem of her skirt just enough to show the upper socket line. Her skin showed a clear band of irritation where metal had rubbed too long. Lina looked away politely, studying the tool rack instead. Ben placed the gel along her thigh with gentle pressure. The coolness spread under his palm. She tried not to tense, but the relief was immediate and her shoulders finally dropped. "You work in scrap hauling?" he asked. She nodded. "I move bins between districts. Long walks, heavy loads. It explains the stress fractures." His voice held no judgment, only calculation as he planned what needed doing. She found herself watching his face. His expression didn't change often, but there was something in the way his eyes narrowed slightly as he worked, focus mixed with a quiet care that unsettled her more than the pain. She pulled her gaze away and looked around the clinic. "You live near this district 3 levels up," Ben said. "Close enough for Lina to wait here after school." Lina sat on a stool and swung her legs lightly. "Dad finishes work late. I like watching the trains and helping strangers," Ben added. It was obvious she needed help. Lina said. "I did." Kalia blinked, touched despite herself. "I didn't expect anyone to notice." "I did," Lina said. "And Dad always listens." Ben began removing the broken ring with a precision tool. The faint click of metal loosening echoed in the quiet room. The prosthetic detached from the hinge with a soft release of pressure. Kalia felt the shift in weight and gripped the table harder. "How long will the repair take?" "Tonight," he said. "If you're willing to wait. I don't want to disrupt your schedule." "You're not." She studied him for a long moment. She sensed no impatience, no hidden frustration. He was simply doing the work in front of him as if it belonged here. Ben rotated the damaged piece under the lamp. "This crack isn't new. You've been compensating with your hip." "It hurt less than asking for replacement," she said. Lina frowned again. "They should have replaced it when it first broke." Kalia didn't respond. There wasn't much to say that the child would understand without seeing the lower district herself. Ben noticed the silence but didn't push. He pulled a reinforced ring from his personal stock. The metal shone smooth and strong next to the worn piece he'd removed. "This will hold," he said. While he began shaping the socket to match her body, Kalia tried to stay still. His hands moved with practiced confidence. Each adjustment brought a slight shift of pressure along her thigh. It was clinical, but she felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with temperature, something like relief mixed with disbelief that someone could work on her limb with this level of care. "You can ask questions if you have them," he said. She hesitated. "Will the repair make it easier to walk long distances?" "Yes," he replied, "and you won't feel that grinding anymore." She let a slow breath slip out. The tension in her neck eased. Ben glanced up briefly. "When was the last time someone adjusted this?" 8 months, she said. He paused. "No alignment since then. My supervisor said I didn't qualify." Lina looked at her father sharply. "That's not right." Ben didn't voice the agreement written on his face. He simply tightened the clamps on the new socket, making sure they aligned perfectly against her skin. The soft tap of the tool, the steady hum of the diagnostic table, and Ben's measured breathing filled the room. For the first time since falling, Kalia felt a sense of order returning to her body. As he worked, he asked, "Do you have anyone at home who can help you if the leg aches tonight?" "No," she said. "It's just me." Lina glanced up, eyes narrowing in a way that meant she didn't like that answer. Ben's voice stayed neutral. "If the gel wears off, the muscles may tighten. I'll send you with a pack." "Thank you," he gave a single nod. "We'll fit the limb soon. You'll stand again tonight." Kalia looked down at her hand resting on the table. Her fingers still shook faintly, not from pain anymore, but from something she couldn't name. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not as a worker in a uniform, not as a liability, but as a person whose discomfort mattered. And Ben worked on, unaware of how deeply that simple fact unsettled her. Ben attached the final stabilizer ring and tightened the last microbolt with a smooth turn of his wrist. The limb gave a low mechanical hum as the new parts synced with the diagnostic table. The light above Kalia dimmed automatically, sensing the alignment was complete. "We're ready to fit it," he said. Kalia nodded and steadied herself with her hands on the table edge. She watched him lift the prosthetic with both hands, careful not to strain any fresh connections, even though it was detached. The limb looked different, cleaner lines, stronger joints, reinforced metal where the old one had worn thin. "Is it heavier?" she asked. "A little," he said, "but it'll distribute weight correctly this time." She swallowed, suddenly aware of how open she felt sitting there with one leg and unfamiliar people watching her. Lina sensed the shift and moved closer, placing a small hand against Kalia's forearm. "It's all right," Lina said. "Dad never breaks anything he fixes." Ben glanced at his daughter with a faint exhale that might have been amusement, then looked back to Kalia. "Ready?" "Yes." He lifted her thigh gently, guiding the socket toward the residual limb. His hands were warm, steady, and clinical. She braced for the usual jolt of pain, but the new socket slid into place with a soft pressure instead of a sharp one. Her fingers tightened on the table. "That feels different." "Better?" he asked. She tested a small shift of her hip. The socket held without grinding. "Yes, much better." Ben locked the release mechanism on the side. The prosthetic clicked into place, the connections seamless. He checked the alignment from 3 angles, then stepped back. "Try lowering your weight slowly," he said. "Don't force anything." She eased herself forward, hands gripping the table for balance. The prosthetic touched the floor with a muted tap. She shifted a fraction of her weight onto it. The joint moved smoothly. Her breath caught. Months of pressure vanished as if someone had lifted a burden she didn't know she still carried. You're standing, Lina said with a grin. Not fully, Kalia murmured, but it's holding. Finish it, Ben said. Stand all the way. She drew a breath and pushed upright. The limb supported her completely. No crooked angle, no metal slipping out of place, no sudden drop threatening to send her to the floor again. The relief hit so sharply she had to blink against a rush of heat behind her eyes. She straightened her back and shifted her weight from one leg to the other. The movement felt almost natural. Ben watched every detail of her posture. Any pain? Only where the old socket rubbed, she said. The joint itself, it feels solid. Lina clapped once, unable to hold in her excitement. I told you he could fix it. Kalia turned to her. You did. Her voice carried a quiet warmth she hadn't expected. Ben walked to the cabinet and pulled out a sealed gel pack. Use this tonight and don't sleep on that side. I won't, she said. He hesitated a moment. Do you have food at home? Something with protein. Your leg muscles will need it. Her silence gave him the answer. I have ration cubes, she said finally. I stretch them through the week. Lina wrinkled her nose. Ration cubes taste like wet chalk. They're what I can afford, Kalia replied gently. Ben opened another drawer. He pulled out a small bag of smoked meat slices and a sealed container of seasoned grain. Take these, he said. They're for my dinner prep. I'll pick up more on the way home. I can't, she said quickly, shaking her head. That's your family's meal. We'll manage, he said. Take them. She stared at the bag, unsure if she should reach for it. In her world, food wasn't given away without expectation. She glanced between him and Lina. Neither looked like they wanted anything in return. Her hand moved slowly. She accepted the bag. Thank you, Ben nodded once, then crouched to check the alignment again. Walk toward me. She took a small step. The limb absorbed the motion beautifully. She took another, then a third. Her posture straightened as her confidence grew. How long will it last? She asked. A long time, he said, and if anything shifts, come back, I'll take care of it. That statement landed deeper than he intended. She wasn't used to promises that sounded that direct. Lina stepped in front of her. We won't let your leg break again. Kalia let out a soft breath that was almost a laugh. I hope not. Ben checked the time. I need to finish the end-of-day report. You can stay until I lock up. Kalia hesitated. I don't want to keep you. You aren't, he said. Sit, rest the limb for a few minutes. It needs to adjust to your weight. She sat on the edge of the table. Lina hopped onto the stool beside her and swung her legs. A quiet moment settled over the room. Kalia looked at the child. Why were you on the ramp waiting alone? Lina pushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Dad's shifts run late. I wait outside if the clinic is full. Do you not have anyone else at home? Kalia asked. It's just us, Lina said simply. Ben didn't look up from the console. We manage. The simplicity in his tone told more than any explanation could. Kalia lowered her gaze to the bag of food in her lap. Her fingers pressed the warm plastic gently. It had been a long time since anyone handed her food without calculation. After a few minutes, Ben shut off the clinic lights one by one. You're clear to go, he said. Walk slowly on the ramp. No sudden changes in pace. Kalia stood again, testing the limb with more confidence. She walked toward the door. Lina followed, grabbing her jacket from the hook. Ben opened the door to the ramp. The evening air hit them, cool, dry, carrying the scent of transit rails and roasted street food drifting from a vendor on the upper walkway. Kalia stepped out and looked back at him. Her voice was quiet. If I didn't come tonight, the leg would have failed completely. Yes, he said, it would have. She absorbed that truth, then met his eyes. Thank you for not letting me disappear into that crowd. You didn't disappear, Ben said. You were right in front of us. The steadiness of his voice settled under her ribs. Lina tugged on her sleeve gently. Will you come back tomorrow so we can check the leg? Kalia hesitated. If it needs it, it does, Lina said confidently. Dad always says new fittings need review. Ben didn't correct her. Kalia nodded slowly. Then I'll return. The three of them stood in the doorway for one brief quiet moment. No noise from the city strong enough to interrupt it. Then Ben locked the clinic door. Lina hooked her arm through his, and Kalia walked into the flow of the evening crowd, her steps steady for the first time in months. Night settled across Orlon Spire with a colder bite than usual. The rail lines glowed in thin blue veins between the towers, and the air carried a dry metallic scent from the upper vents. Workers moved in clusters toward housing blocks. Delivery drones zipped between levels, silent, efficient, avoiding the walkways entirely. Kalia walked with care. The repaired prosthetic moved smoothly beneath her skirt, absorbing each step without the sharp ache she had grown used to. She tested her weight on it several times, checking for instability. Nothing shifted, nothing pinched. The steady support felt unfamiliar after months of grinding pain. The small food bag from Ben hung from her fingers, warm against her palm. She kept replaying the scene in the clinic, Lina's hand on her arm, Ben's calm instruction, the quiet certainty in his voice. It unsettled her how easily they had pulled her out of the crowd without hesitation. People didn't usually do that, not for someone like her. A group of scrap workers passed her, uniforms matching her own. None of them recognized her. She let her gaze drop as she walked by. If they saw the upgraded joint, they would ask questions she didn't want to answer. She reached the lift that took her down 3 levels to the housing district. The door slid open. The lift was nearly full, but no one met her eyes. She stepped inside, adjusting her weight subtly to test the rhythm of the new joint. A man next to her glanced at the limb just briefly, then looked away before she could react. At least this time there was no laughter. When the lift opened again, she stepped into a narrow corridor lined with rows of housing rooms. Faint cooking smells drifted through vents, boiled root vegetables, heated ration broth, something fried in recycled oil. She reached her door, pressed her code, and slipped inside. Her room was small, a narrow cot, a metal table, one storage compartment, and a dim overhead light. She set the food bag on the table. The warmth of the smoked meat inside seeped faintly through the thin wrapper. She opened it. 2 portions larger than she expected, enough for tonight and part of tomorrow. She sat on the cot, placed the meat and grain container beside her, and stared at them longer than she intended. The simple act of someone giving her food without expecting repayment tightened her throat in a way she didn't quite understand. She ate slowly, savoring the seasoning, peppered, lightly smoked, nothing like the bland tokens she usually received. She imagined Lina helping prepare it, probably sneaking extra spices when Ben wasn't looking. The thought made her chest warm. When she finished, she leaned back against the wall. Her muscles relaxed and exhaustion pulled at her, but her mind stayed alert. Ben said she should return tomorrow for a calibration check. No one had ever told her to return before. Repairs usually ended with a dismissive good luck or an invoice she couldn't pay. She closed her eyes briefly. Her leg felt steady, solid under her, balanced enough that she didn't need to brace the cot for support every time she moved. She shifted forward and stood again, testing her weight once more, still smooth. She exhaled and allowed herself to sit again. A soft knock sounded at her door. She froze. Her company supervisors never came at night. Neighbors didn't visit. For a moment, she wondered if she had imagined it. Another knock followed, gentle, quick, then silence. She approached the door with caution and checked the viewer screen. A young boy stood outside holding a small parcel. She recognized him, one of the district runners who delivered notices and messages for minimum pay. She opened the door slightly. Yes, he handed her the parcel. From the collection office. Supervisor wants confirmation tomorrow at shift start. Her stomach dropped. What confirmation? No idea, the boy said. They told me to say you missed your quota today. She blinked. I fell on the ramp. My limb broke, the boy shrugged, uncomfortable. They said to report anyway. He backed away down the corridor. Kalia closed the door and set the parcel on the table. Inside was a printed slip, a notice requiring her to present herself to the scrap supervisor for performance review. That usually meant a warning. Sometimes it meant reassignment, sometimes removal from the roster. Losing her job meant losing her housing room. Her hand tightened around the notice until the edges bent. She stood there for a long moment, feeling the repaired limb under her and the weight of everything else pressing in around it. The next morning's confrontation would be unpleasant. She would need to explain why she didn't finish her route, and she couldn't say Ben repaired my leg because the company considered outside maintenance unauthorized. A faint ache returned, not from the joint but from fear creeping into her chest. She forced herself to sit again. She folded the notice and tucked it under her storage bin. Not tonight, she would deal with it tomorrow. She lay down on the cot, the thin blanket barely covering her legs. She stared at the ceiling. The faint vibration of the tower hummed through the metal frame. Her last thought before sleep pulled her under was simple and unsettling. If she lost her job tomorrow, what would she tell Ben and Lina? Ben and Lina walked home through the quieter upper ramp. Lina held a small pack of seasoning in her hands, something she insisted on buying for tomorrow's dinner. The walkway lights cast soft reflections on the polished stone. Dad, Lina said, will she really come back tomorrow? Yes, Ben answered. She needs to follow up, and if her job gets angry she didn't finish her shift, we'll see what happens. You think she'll get in trouble? He didn't confirm or deny it. He only adjusted the strap of his work bag on his shoulder and kept walking. Lina watched him closely. If she needs help, we'll help her, right? Ben didn't answer immediately. He wasn't a man who promised things he couldn't deliver. But he'd seen the fragility in Kalia's posture when she first stepped into his clinic, and he'd seen her steady herself with quiet dignity when she left. Yes, he finally said. If she needs help, we'll be there. Lina smiled and skipped a step ahead, relieved. Ben looked up at the city lights' endless rows of windows, rails stretching in glowing lines. Somewhere below, Kalia was returning to a space she probably called home, but never truly felt safe in. He planned to guide her through the steps she needed to regain her independence, even if she didn't fully understand them yet. And tomorrow, when she stepped back into his clinic, he intended to ask the questions he hadn't asked tonight: where she lived, who she depended on, and whether anyone else was looking out for her at all. A low wind swept across the ramp, brushing against his sleeves. He hoped the answer wasn't no. Kalia arrived at the scrap facility before sunrise. The ramps outside were nearly empty, and the air still held the cold bite of early morning. Her repaired leg moved with a clean rhythm beneath her skirt, smooth enough that it almost felt like her own limb again. But every step carried a quiet tension. Her supervisor's notice weighed heavy in her pocket. Inside, the loading bay lights flickered awake. Workers gathered in scattered groups, rubbing their arms to keep warm. The metallic smell of rusted machinery mixed with a sharper scent of chemical cleaners used on the sorting belts. She walked toward the supervisor's office, heart beating faster than her steps. Supervisor Wren stood behind the desk, going through a stack of printed quotas. He didn't look up when she entered, his gray uniform stretched tight across his stomach, his fingers tapping the desk in an impatient rhythm. You missed your final bin yesterday, he said without greeting. My prosthetic failed, Kalia answered. I fell. The limb collapsed on the transit ramp. Ren finally raised his head. His eyes moved to her leg, taking in the upgraded joint, the reinforced ring, the fresh calibration marks. That's not one of ours, he said sharply. It needed repair, she replied. It was unsafe. Our equipment is serviced only by company technicians, you know that. They refused my request for maintenance. The joint was failing. Ren leaned back, crossing his arms. You used an outside clinic. She kept her posture steady. A municipal specialist repaired it. The limb was dangerously damaged. That's not the point, he snapped. You bypassed procedure. Her stomach tightened. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, he said. Report the issue. Wait for approval. Wait for replacement. We have structure for a reason. I couldn't walk, she said quietly. Then you should have stayed where you fell until an authorized responder arrived. She felt heat rising in her chest, anger, disbelief, fear all tangled together. No responder came. Ren shrugged as if that part didn't matter. You still violated the maintenance directive. He pulled a form from the drawer and set it on the desk. Sign this acknowledgement and report to sorting duty for re-evaluation. She stepped closer, scanning the page. It stated that she accepted responsibility for unauthorized modifications and waived her right to appeal any changes to her work status. What happens if I refuse? She asked. Ren didn't hesitate. Housing revocation and removal from the district roster. A cold weight settled on her ribs. Losing her job meant losing her room. Losing her room meant losing everything she had built to stay afloat. He tapped the form again. Sign Kalia. She stared at the page. Her hand shook slightly as she picked up the pen. A voice came from the doorway. She won't be signing that. Ren looked up, annoyed. Who is? Ben stepped inside. He still wore his dark clinic jacket, unzipped at the collar from walking fast. Lina stood just behind him, clutching her school satchel. Her expression held stubborn determination far too strong for someone her age. Kalia's breath caught. She hadn't expected him here. She hadn't told him about the notice, and yet he had come anyway. Ren frowned. This is a restricted area. You don't have authorization. I do, Ben said, holding up a municipal badge. I'm here to document a public safety incident regarding one of your workers. Ren bristled. This has nothing to do with the city. It does, Ben replied. She fell because of an equipment failure. If the prosthetic hadn't been repaired, she could have been seriously injured or harmed others on the ramp. Ren scoffed. The limb was old, where is expected. That limb was misaligned and unsafe, Ben said. And you denied her maintenance. This worker's performance is not under municipal review. It is now, Ben said. If you terminate her over this repair, I will log a formal complaint citing negligence. Ren's jaw tensed. You're interfering in internal operations. I'm notifying you of a safety violation, Ben corrected. Which is my job. The room went silent. Lina stepped forward, voice calm but firm. She couldn't walk. Dad fixed it because nobody else would. Ren stared at the child, then at Ben, calculating a risk. Challenging a city medic wasn't smart, especially one with a military background and the authority to file incident reports that could drag an entire department into review. He snatched the form off the desk and shoved it into a drawer. Fine, she returns to duty today. The words came out strained. But any future unauthorized modifications will result in, Ben cut in. Future repairs will be handled appropriately by me. Ren's eyes narrowed. This is highly irregular. So is letting a worker walk around with a fractured prosthetic, Ben said. If you have a complaint, you can file it. Ren didn't answer. He picked up another file, pretending to read it, signaling the conversation was over. Kalia stood still, processing the shift. One moment, she'd been staring at a threat to her life. The next, someone had stepped in, not quietly, not from the shadows, but in front of a supervisor who held control over her survival. As Ben turned toward her, she exhaled the breath she'd been holding since sunrise. Are you all right? He asked. She nodded slowly. How did you know? You weren't at the clinic, he said, and Lina asked why. Lina lifted her chin proudly. I told him something was wrong. Kalia tried to speak, but her voice caught. You didn't have to come? Yes, Ben said quietly. I did. Ren coughed pointedly from the desk. Ben stepped closer to Kalia, lowering his voice. Walk your route slowly today. If the alignment shifts even a little, come back immediately. She swallowed. I will. And eat the rest of the food tonight. Your muscles need it. She nodded again. Lina reached for her hand. We'll see you after work. Kalia hesitated, not wanting to impose. Ben answered for her. We'll be at the clinic. Come by. Her chest tightened. I'll come. Ben gave a short nod, then guided Lina out of the office. When the door closed, Kalia stood perfectly still. Her supervisor pretended to ignore her, but his posture was rigid. She turned away from him, the repaired limb steady under her, and walked out of the office with more control in her stride than she'd felt in months. Someone had chosen her, in public, not as a worker, not as a burden, but as someone worth standing beside. And for the first time in years, the fear pressing against her ribs loosened just enough for something else to slip in, quiet, confusing, and warm. The evening rushed thin by the time Kalia reached the municipal district again. Her shift had dragged longer than usual, extra inspections, extra eyes on her, a supervisor watching for any mistake he could note, but the repaired prosthetic held. Every lift, every walk across the sorting floor, every heavy bin felt controlled and stable. When she stepped through the clinic door, she found Ben adjusting a calibration tool at his workstation. Lina sat on the floor nearby, sketching something on a scrap tablet, a stick figure drawing of a green woman, a tall man, and a small girl all holding hands. Lina noticed her first. You came back, I said I would, Kalia said softly. Ben turned at the sound of her voice. He scanned her posture, the way her weight balanced over the limb, her shoulders tight from the long day. He set the tool down. Close the door, he said. You look exhausted. She closed it quietly and leaned back against it for a moment. Her hands trembled slightly from fatigue. She tried to hide it. Lina stood and tugged her toward the diagnostic chair. Sit. Dad said you're not supposed to walk too much today. I walked plenty, Kalia admitted. Ben's eyes narrowed slightly. Did the limb hold? Yes, she said, perfectly. He gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself onto the chair with a slow exhale. The muscles along her thigh tightened, then relaxed again now that the weight was off. Lina grabbed her water flask. Drink. You look like you forgot to breathe all day. Kalia accepted it with a tired smile. It was a long shift. Ben moved closer, stopping in front of her knees. Supervisor give you trouble? She looked down at her hands. He wasn't pleased. Did he threaten you again? Ben asked. Her silence answered him. He exhaled once, controlled. We'll deal with that later. Lina hopped onto the smaller stool beside Kalia. Dad brought dinner in case you came. Kalia blinked. Dinner? Ben nodded toward a covered container on the counter. Roasted grains, sautéed greens, smoked meat strips, enough for 3. Her chest tightened. I can't take your meals every night. This one's not charity, he said. We're eating it together. The simple certainty in his tone startled her. No one ever phrased things that way with her, not as an offer, but as something shared. Lina grabbed the container eagerly. We already warmed it. Ben wiped down the small rolling table and moved it in front of Kalia. He unpacked the dishes, warm roasted grain with flecks of peppered seasoning, thin slices of smoked meat, greens cooked in a light oil that gave off a soft aroma. Kalia's stomach tightened, not from hunger alone, but from the strange warm pressure of being included. Lina handed her a fork. Eat before Dad steals all the meat. Ben snorted. I don't steal food. You do, Lina said. You stole my last pepper stick yesterday. That wasn't stealing, he said. You left it unattended. Kalia's shoulders eased for the first time since morning. Their back and forth filled the clinic with something soft, something domestic. She took a bite. The smoked meat melted against her tongue, rich, savory, nothing like what she usually ate. Ben watched her reaction without pressing for praise. Good, he asked. She nodded, swallowing carefully. Better than anything I've had this year. Then eat, he said. She did. The tension in her limbs slowly faded as the warmth of the food spread through her. By the time she finished, the tightness in her chest felt less like fear and more like a slow unwinding she didn't notice happening until it was already there. Ben knelt in front of her again. Let me check the limb. She lifted her skirt slightly to expose the socket line. The action wasn't intentional, just necessary for the inspection, but the hem brushed higher than she expected. She froze for a second. Ben didn't react. His expression stayed strictly clinical, focused on the limb, but the moment still sent a faint tremor through her, not fear, not embarrassment, but something warmer and unfamiliar. He checked the joint alignment, brushing his thumb lightly along the edge of the reinforcement ring. The contact sent a subtle heat up her thigh. You're compensating with your hip again, he murmured. I tried not to, she said. You've walked wrong for months. It'll take time to loosen that habit. She swallowed, watching him work. The closeness between them settled heavily in the room. Lina was busy wiping crumbs off the table, humming softly to herself, completely at ease. Ben adjusted one of the clamps with careful precision. His hand brushed her skin again, barely a touch, but enough for her breath to hitch. She didn't pull back. He noticed a slight change in her breathing and paused, not withdrawing, only observing her face long enough to confirm she wasn't in pain. Pressure okay? He asked gently. Yes, she whispered. He tightened the last clamp. You're stable, no misalignment. She exhaled slowly. Thank you. Stand, he said. She rose from the chair, moving closer to him than she realized. Their bodies aligned within arm's reach. Her repaired limb tapped softly against the floor. How does it feel? He asked. Secure, she said. Good. For a moment, neither of them stepped back. Lina broke the stillness by grabbing Kalia's hand. Come home with us tonight, Kalia blinked. What? Ben looked at his daughter. Lina, she's tired. And her supervisor is mean, Lina said. She shouldn't sleep alone in that tiny room. Kalia's heartbeat kicked once hard. I can't impose like that. Ben studied her carefully. Lina's not wrong. You shouldn't be alone tonight after that confrontation. I've managed alone for years, she said quietly. Tonight doesn't have to be another one of those years, he replied. Something in his tone, steady, not forceful, hit deeper than he intended. Kalia lowered her gaze. The thought of stepping into someone else's home felt dangerous, intimate, almost too warm compared to what she knew. But the thought of returning to her cold room suddenly felt heavier. Lina squeezed her hand. Just for tonight. Kalia hesitated. Ben spoke softly. You're not burdening us. Her walls cracked just enough. She nodded. Lina grinned and threw her arms around Kalia's waist. Kalia froze, then slowly wrapped her arms around the child's shoulders, surprised at how natural it felt. Ben watched the two of them, something unreadable settling behind his eyes. He picked up his jacket. Let's go. And as they stepped out of the clinic together, Lina holding one hand, the repaired limb steady under the other, something quiet and irreversible began to shift between them. The walk to Ben's apartment followed a quiet upper ramp that curved around the municipal towers. Evening lights flickered on across the district, washing the walkway in a soft amber tone. The city below hummed, ventilation shafts, distant transit rails, the low buzz of night markets beginning to open. Kalia stayed close to Ben and Lina, unsure of the rules in this part of the spire. Her repaired limb moved with practiced steadiness, but the unfamiliar comfort of walking beside two people who clearly wanted her there made her chest feel unsteady. Lina swung her satchel as she walked. Dad made stew this morning before work. Kalia looked at her. Before work, he wakes up too early, Lina said matter-of-factly. Someone has to cook, Ben added. It reached a narrow metal door recessed into the side of a residential block. Ben typed a code, and the door slid open with a soft chime. The interior was modest, a couch with worn cushions, a small dining table with one chair noticeably newer than the others, probably Lina's replacement after breaking one, a kitchen corner with neatly arranged utensils, and a simmer pot resting in the warmer. The space smelled like cooked vegetables, herbs, and a faint trace of roasted meat. Kalia stepped inside slowly. Her eyes adjusted to the warm lighting. She wasn't used to being in someone else's home, especially not one this clean or this inviting. Lina ran ahead and pulled out a folded blanket from the couch. "You can sit here, it's soft." Kalia set her bag down and rested on the edge of the couch. The cushion sank gently beneath her weight, far more comfortable than her room's cot. She drew her repaired leg slightly, checking for soreness after the long walk. The joint felt warm but stable. Ben hung his jacket near the door. "I'll heat the stew." "You don't need to serve me," Kalia murmured. He glanced at her. "You're our guest, let me do it." She fell quiet, unsure how to respond. As he moved through the kitchen opening containers, stirring the pot, plating the stew, she noticed small details she hadn't seen before. The careful way he handled utensils, the habit of checking the seasoning by scent instead of taste, the silent efficiency learned from years of managing a household alone. Her gaze drifted to Lina, who was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing again. This time she sketched Kalia with her new limb, making it shine brighter than the rest of the figure. "Why do you draw so much?" Kalia asked. "It helps me think," Lina said. "When I don't draw, I worry." "About what, Dad?" she said simply. Ben turned from the stove. "I'm fine, Lina. You're always tired," she replied. The room quieted for a moment. Ben carried 3 bowls to the table. "Come eat." Kalia stood carefully and joined them. The stew smelled rich, thick broth, root vegetables softened until tender, small shreds of seasoned meat. She spooned a small portion and tasted it. Warm, savory, comforting. Lina ate quickly, then slowed when she remembered her manners. Ben ate quietly, glancing at Kalia occasionally, not to judge her, but to check she was comfortable, that the food wasn't too heavy after a hard day. Halfway through the meal, he asked, "Did your supervisor speak to you again after we left?" Kalia shook her head. "He avoided me the rest of the day." "That's good," Ben said. "He knows pushing again will draw attention." She lowered her gaze. "You shouldn't have intervened like that." "Yes," he said firmly. "I should have." Lina nodded in agreement. Kalia set her spoon down, trying to steady the swirl of gratitude and discomfort inside her. She had survived so long by relying on no one. Now she sat in a stranger's home eating food prepared hours before she arrived, with a child sketching her as though she belonged here. After dinner, Lina carried their bowls to the sink. Ben wiped the table and moved a small storage box to clear space for Kalia's bag. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "The couch folds out." "I don't want to take your place," she replied. "You aren't," he said. "My room is separate," she hesitated. "I've never stayed anywhere but the worker rooms." Lina hopped onto the couch. "Then you need to try somewhere better." Kalia sat back down, watching the room settle around her, the softly humming light panel, the faint clatter of dishes as Lina rinsed them, the quiet confidence in Ben's movements. None of it matched the cold, cramped world she knew. She tested her limb again. The weight of the day rested heavily on her thigh and hip. When she shifted, a soft ache shot upward. She tried to hide the wince, but Ben saw it. "Pain?" he asked. "Just tired," she said. He knelt in front of her. "May I check?" She nodded. He placed his hands gently on her knee and along the attachment line, feeling for heat, misalignment, strain. His fingers were warm and sure, his touch steady. When he adjusted her leg slightly, her breath hitched, not in pain but from the sudden closeness. She didn't move away. "Overworked," he said quietly. "Tomorrow you shouldn't walk as much." She watched him, not the mechanic, not the medic, but the man who had shown up for her without being asked. "What do people do?" she asked, voice low. "When they're not used to being helped," he met her eyes. "They learn." Her throat tightened. Lina returned, wiping her hands on a towel. "Dad, show her the balcony." Ben stood and motioned for Kalia to follow. He slid open a narrow door leading to a small balcony overlooking the lower districts. The city stretched beneath them in layers of soft light. Rails wound between towers like silver threads. Air vents blew warm currents upward. Kalia stepped out, gripping the railing. The wind brushed her hair, cooling her face. The view felt too wide, too open compared to her cramped room. "Lina loves this spot," Ben said. "Says it feels like the city is breathing." Kalia nodded. "It's beautiful." She turned slightly. Ben stood close, not touching, but close enough that warmth radiated from him. "You don't have to go back to the worker room tonight," he said softly. Her voice came out barely audible. "If I stay, I don't know what that means." "It means you sleep somewhere safe," he said. Nothing more, but something deeper settled between them, something neither of them tried to name. She exhaled slowly. "All right." Ben stepped back, giving her space. "I'll set up the couch." When he walked inside, Kalia remained on the balcony a moment longer, watching the glowing levels of Orlon Spire below. The repaired limb held steady beneath her. Her breath steadied too. For the first time in years, she didn't dread the night. She didn't brace for cold or silence or being forgotten. She stayed because she wanted to, and because someone wanted her here. Ben dimmed the apartment lights as the city settled into its late-night rhythm. Distant rails hummed beneath the tower, a steady pulse that softened once the last commuter lines closed. Lina had already fallen asleep in her small room, curled under a blanket, her sketchbook still open beside her. Kalia stood near the balcony door, arms folded lightly over her stomach. She watched the faint glow rising from the lower levels, a slow, wavering reflection against the glass. Her hair hung loosely over one shoulder, the ends brushing the fabric of Ben's shirt she wore. It was too big for her, falling just above her thighs, but she didn't seem uncomfortable in it anymore. Ben finished securing the fold-out couch, smoothing the blanket across it. "It should be warm enough," he said. "It is," she replied. Her voice carried something calmer than the night before. He noticed. She stepped away from the window and came toward him. Her prosthetic clicked softly as she moved across the floor. "Do you mind if I sit for a moment?" "It's your place tonight," he said. "Sit wherever you want." She lowered herself onto the edge of the fold-out. Ben crouched beside the leg to check the alignment strap, more out of habit than necessity. When he reached for it, she stopped his hand gently. "It's fine," she said. He paused, studying her expression. She wasn't pushing him away. She simply didn't need help right now. He straightened. "I've been thinking," she said. "About what? About this?" Her gaze moved around the room. "Being here, being with you and Lina, the kind of life you already built." He waited. She seemed to choose her words with care. "I'm scared," she said quietly. "Not of you. Of wanting something I'm not supposed to have." Ben sat beside her, close but not too close. "You think this is something you're not allowed?" "I think I don't know the rules," she said. "Every place I've been, belonging was never an option. You're not at those places anymore." She closed her eyes briefly, letting that sink in. When she opened them, she looked straight at him. "If I stay," she said, "I want to stay because I choose it, not because I have nowhere else." "Then choose it," he said, her throat tightened. "And what do you choose?" Ben didn't rush. He glanced at the silent hallway where Lina slept, then at Kalia, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing slow and tense, her shoulders rising only slightly with each breath. "I choose you here," he said, "in this home. Not as a guest." Her fingers curled slightly. A quiet shift in her posture betrayed how much weight that sentence carried. He added, "But only if you want it just as much." "I do," she whispered. The words trembled at the edges, not from hesitation but from relief. He reached toward her, slow enough for her to stop him. She didn't. His hand settled on her thigh, her real leg, warm skin beneath the oversized shirt. She exhaled softly, leaning into his touch. Her hand covered his, steady, giving permission. For a moment they sat in silence, the city humming beneath them, their breaths gradually finding the same rhythm. "Come to the balcony a moment," she said. He stood with her. She slid the door open, letting a mild breeze sweep through. The district lights cast her green skin in soft gradients, the pale glow tracing her collarbone and the curve of her jaw. She rested her hands on the railing and looked out over Orlon Spire. "I used to watch these towers from the lower ramps," she said. "I thought anyone who lived up here must have everything." "Most people here don't have anything that matters," Ben replied. She turned her head slightly. "What matters to you?" He stepped closer, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "That you're safe, that Lina stops worrying, that we stop pretending this isn't becoming real." Her breath caught. She didn't step away. Her hand slid along the railing until it touched his. "I didn't know humans could say things like that so simply," she said. "I'll learn to stop wasting words," he answered. She let her fingers curl around his. The connection was small but deliberate, a choice made in full clarity. Inside the apartment, they moved quietly. She sat again on the fold-out couch, but this time she didn't sit at the edge. She leaned back slightly, shoulders relaxed. He stood in front of her, waiting, not assuming, not leading, just present. "Ben," she said softly, "come here." He lowered himself beside her, their bodies aligned in an unhurried, natural way. She shifted closer, letting her knee touch his. When she looked up at him, there was no tension in her face, only a steady, searching focus. "Is this allowed?" she asked. "It is," he said, "if you want it." She nodded. "I want it." He kissed her gently at first, soft pressure, warm breath, her hand rising instinctively to his cheek. She tasted faintly of dinner herbs and the sweet tea Lina had given her earlier. Her fingers traced his jawline, then slid into his hair. When he deepened the kiss, she responded without hesitation, drawing him closer. The couch creaked under their shifting weight. She eased backward, pulling him with her, the oversized shirt slipping slightly off one shoulder. He moved slowly, attentive to every breath she took, every small change in how her body met his. Her prosthetic rested against the blanket, steady and unintrusive. Her real leg slid along his thigh, warm and deliberate. "Ben," she murmured, "don't rush." "I'm not," he said. Their closeness unfolded with a quiet intensity, steady hands, warm skin, the sound of breath shared in tight space. She held him around the shoulders, her nails grazing lightly across his back. He traced the line of her waist beneath the shirt, feeling her tremble, a mix of anticipation and trust. She whispered his name again, and the way she said it pulled him deeper into her. The night moved slowly around them. Nothing forced, nothing hidden, nothing uncertain. Later, when their bodies finally stilled and their breathing steadied, Kalia lay partially draped against him, her cheek resting on his chest. He held her with one arm, fingers tracing gentle shapes along her spine. She listened to his heartbeat. He listened to her breath. Neither spoke for several minutes. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were softer than he had ever seen them. "This doesn't go away tomorrow," she said. "Not for me." "It won't," he replied. "You're sure?" "I am." She lowered her head back to his chest, the smallest smile forming quiet, unguarded. Morning would bring questions, logistics, decisions. Tonight brought something else, a permanent choice made without fear.